So, Jerry, like, how did you end up being the Chief Information Officer at the Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Health and Human Services?
I lost a bet. No. 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 My journey's kind of unique. I'm from northern Maine, up in the woods, and
Hmm.
joined the army. After 7 years in the army, I got stationed at the Pentagon, and I decided, at the time, IT was the big thing, and what better place to be than in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
I ended up becoming a contractor back in 2001 at the Department of State, answering telephones on a help desk. From there, I worked my way up through hard work into some management positions, and then I became a member of the senior executive service in my last job as director for enterprise network management at Department
Hmm.
of State, where basically I was responsible for all the infrastructure, Active Directory, the network overseas, domestically,
Hmm.
perimeter security, a lot of things. And I applied to this job here as a CIO for the Office of the Inspector General here at HHS. Try to do something different.
Hmm.
And so I've been here for a year and a half at this point, and been very interesting. My time at State, I was involved in some events
Hmm.
and kind of took on a role of the remediation and eviction
Right.
lead in some of those events, and that led me to be an evangelist many, many, many years ago before executive orders and memos came out about it on zero trust. So I've
Hmm.
been also chairing a few working groups around that area. One I try chair with other CIOs
Hmm.
and somebody from the National Institute for Science and Technology up at
Okay.
NIST,
Yep.
and I do at a nonprofit as well. So, um, big believer in zero trust and cybersecurity as well,
Yeah.
due to
And
my
that's
experience.
exactly why we're so excited to have you here today, right? So just sort of before we come on to specifically about zero trust, right? You're at State, right? 110,000 users that you're managing, and now you're kind of at OIG at HHS, which is about 2,000 users, right? So it's like almost sort of, if I do my maths correctly, it's about sort of 2% of what you were doing at State, right? From a user base perspective. So what are the unique sort of security challenges of both of those environments?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So at State, I kind of ran central infrastructure and things like that, but um, you know, all the different bureaus, and it's kind of here the same at HHS. There's I don't want to say autonomy necessarily, but they have their own unique
Mm-hmm.
missions. They have their own IT needs. So why I provided central resources as far as networking and things like that, I had to accommodate. And in a big federated organization like that, it's hard to get things moving
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. Here at the IG, the difference is we do wholly own and run our own network and
Mm-hmm.
systems and things like that. We are looking at things as a service, like we're taking advantage of SOC as a service because
Mm-hmm.
I'm limited in my IT resources, but we're able to be more flexible and agile as a result
Mm-hmm.
because I own the responsibility for everything and it's pretty much centralized. Whereas a big organization, sometimes it's hard to get things moving
Yep.
while trying to accommodate all those specific missions. Where here is we're pretty much centralized and we're still able to be a good example
Mm-hmm.
for scalability and the art of the possible through our
Mm-hmm.
implementations and be able to share that with the larger agency or others as
Mm-hmm.
well. So because we're able to move a little more flexible and agilely.
Yep. And yeah, it's kind of like
Agilely, is that a word?
it's all right. It's all right. We'll add it to the Oxford English Dictionary next year. No problem. Right. So that when you talk about sort of State as being very, because it's a large behemoth of an organization, right? It's, as you said, like it's sort of a lot of the infrastructure or running it is federated. So how do you like ensure consistency of security posture across all of those sort of federated sub agencies, if that's the right term, or sub sort of units? Like how is that sort of managed, monitored, governed?
Yeah, one of the things we did, and we actually ran this little tool called, out of my shop called iPost. So you have a lot of tools, right?
Mm.
Every organization has a lot of tools. But what happens is you look at them all in silos.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, how am I doing at patching? All right. What we did and what we're doing here, and it's going to lead, it's one of our, what do we call one of our foundational projects that we're going to be doing here, is integrate that data.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're kind of decentralized and people downstream are responsible for that IT security, we kind of brought all that information together, made those relationships
Mm-hmm.
between, all right, here's the Active Directory computer object. All right, here's all the patch data for that. Here's all the vulnerability. Here's all the scan data. Here's the
Mm-hmm.
software and the versions and the
Mm-hmm.
operating system. Is that on the approved list, which is over here? And we built this dashboard for, so basically, and we made these groups like it could be an office or an
Mm-hmm.
embassy or some location or a logical group of people or a system, and we brought all that together and we kind of put this methodology over it and
Mm-hmm.
had this what we call an operational risk score.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't need to know how to use the tools. We didn't have to train people on how to use these tools. We didn't have to give access to these tools. We
Mm-hmm.
brought all that data together, presented it in easy to use fashion, and kind of told them, all right, come in the morning, you look at that at your site and say, oh, hey, my patch score is way up and it's dropped me down to a D this morning when I was a
Mm-hmm.
B yesterday. What is it I need to pay attention to? Oh, okay, here's exactly I need to do this patch on these systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we presented that information to them in that way. Now, we're going to do the same thing here because, again, I don't, as a CIO, I need to be able to know what my operational risk posture is. How are we doing overall?
Yeah.
So going to be integrating those data sources that we can leverage, find out where our gaps are, put this scoring methodology over that, and then create this dashboard to say, all right, how are we doing? How are we doing operationally with our managing our risk from patching to
Mm-hmm.
vulnerabilities to configurations and all that, end of life equipment
Yep.
and all that. So we're bringing that concept. We're going to start doing that. Now, why I say that's a foundational project for Zero Trust, think about it. We need to do that in more real time later. So we're
Mm.
going to need all that telemetry from all those tools to make those decisions in more real time. Now, different tools come in different um, waves, so to speak. Like one may be every 8 hours, one may be every 5 minutes, depends. So it's like what's minimally, if Raghu's coming into my network and trying to access this data source, all right, what do I know about him? All right, he authenticated this way. He's on a
Mm-hmm.
managed computer, which I know about. Coming in on the VPN, a network that I'm managing because he's in the office. Okay, I have enough information to say it's pretty safe to let him through the front door.
Mm-hmm.
He can start his work. While, all right, let me check these secondary things and make decisions off that. So I'm doing a constant check. I'm not just giving you access
Yep.
into the door, but I'm doing a constant real time check as much as possible, and the tools can accommodate in making decisions based on what my risk thresholds are.
By the way, do you know this is a zero trust podcast? I'm not sure if you're aware.
Oh, is it?
So you kind of like sort of just naturally went to zero trust. I was like, what? Like sort of jumping the gun a bit, and because I think that collation of data that you talked about and providing that consistent view is such a important part of sort of bringing everyone along in that security journey, right? and
Yep.
and and enacting that culture shift, right? So in your
And I
view.
think going back to your original question about the differences in a decentralized and even in a centralized, I want to see the pockets, the logical
Yeah.
pockets of groups of things. I may have contractors responsible for this system.
Mm.
And I can say how are they doing based on the contract because we got to hold them
Yeah,
accountable,
yeah,
metrics
yeah,
and stuff. So there's a ways to do that too in the way you group things. So it's coming up with that grouping, I think, and bringing that telemetry together to make those decisions. And then, yeah, just naturally it falls into it's a great foundational thing for
Yep.
as we advance towards zero trust, because you're going to need all that information to
Oh,
make those decisions.
100%, right? Because it's like that complete visibility end to end is like the foundation on which all of your security decisions are then made. So almost kind of without sort of advertising it as a zero trust program, just kind of having that in place is such a great place to start. I've sort of read like you have some great analogies for zero trust, right? That involve peanut butter, which I love, right? And the cinema, which I kind of like the cinema if it means I've got a bucket of popcorn in front of me, right?
Yes.
So give me like let's hear your peanut butter and cinema zero
Okay.
trust analogies.
Yeah, so we historically have done everybody says castle moat. I like to say the Tootsie Roll Pop method of cybersecurity: hard outer shell,
Yeah, yeah,
perimeter,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and the soft gooey center, right? And I think the other thing is we also doesn't matter if it's the crown jewels of the bologna sandwich. We always have tried to do that peanut butter spread approach. Make sure the peanut butter was spread evenly. Well, the fact of the matter is, if I lose my bologna sandwich, there's plenty of bologna and bread in the world. I'll probably make another one. Am I concerned? Yeah, because it's kind of frustrating. I got to go make a new one. But my crown jewels, if those are lost, that's it. There's no getting them back, kind of thing. So thinking about that being data is what's most important and
Yeah.
what do we need to concentrate on. So if my bologna sandwich gets stolen, all right, are my crown jewels still protected? I prevented lateral movement. That's what I want to do. I don't want them to elevate themselves to the crown jewels. Yeah, my bologna sandwich got stolen. I'm concerned. So the analogy about the movie theater is you go to the multiplex movie theater. You buy a ticket online, however, and where the example I have in the movie theater I used to go to, I don't go there anymore because I found a new cool one. But they scanned your ticket in the lobby.
Yep.
So you walk in the front door, they scan your ticket in the lobby. Now I'm allowed in the movie theater. I have access to the concessions to get my popcorn, the restrooms, the general things if you're allowed in the front door of the movie theater to go to. But I was also able to walk into any movie theater.
Yeah.
Why? Because nobody was checking my ticket at the
Yep.
doors. There's 20 theaters. There's not 20 people at the doors. So basically, being a good ethical person, I go to my movie, but of course, you could be there all day and movie hop all you
Yep.
wanted.
Yep.
So, and then sit in any seat because there's no ushers checking and everything. So probably if the camera broke down, you'd probably have to get up out of the movie theater and go get somebody to let them know, kind of thing, and everything. That's kind of historically, kind of the way the legacy type of security. They had the perimeter, which is front door, get in the
Yep.
lobby, and then you're in, right?
Yep.
And I can move around laterally wherever
Yep.
I want. And the movie itself being that data, right?
Yep.
So I could go in and, hey, IMAX is showing in 5 minutes. I bought a ticket for the rig. I'm just going to go in the IMAX
Yep.
version. That's much
Yep.
better. So with zero trust, here's where that becomes different. Still, I'm going to get my ticket scanned at the lobby to make sure I'm allowed inside the theater. But when I show up at the movie, and I still have access to the popcorn and the restrooms, I'm in that perimeter,
Yep.
that larger perimeter. Now, I am getting my ticket scanned also when I show up at the movie theater door.
Yep.
Now, if I was trying to walk into the IMAX and I had a regular ticket and they checked it, go back to the ticket booth and upgrade yourself. So
Yep.
do some kind of step-up authentication, and then we'll let you in. But,
Yep.
all right, I get my ticket scanned at the door. Yes, this is valid. You are allowed in. I'm assigned a seat. And then you have the usher come in and checking constantly. Is the projector working? Is the screen down? Are the lights low? Are the little lights on the walkway so people don't trip there? Are the exit signs lit? Is everything working? Checking all these factors constantly to make sure that the data that I'm trying to consume, being that movie, everything's in its right place. I am who I am. I'm in where I'm supposed to be. And everything's working. And somebody's coming and doing that constant check. And if some threshold is met, the projector goes down or something, boom, automatically automation is going to take place
Yep.
and do
Yeah.
whatever it needs to do. So that's kind of the analogy I use for it.
Awesome. Awesome. So there you go. Right. That's how we connect peanut butter, films, cinema, and zero trust. So what was the like? You're clearly very sort of passionate about zero trust and sort of see the value in it, right? So how are you driving the adoption of zero trust at the OIG? Right. What is your focus there?
Yeah. So when I first came in, nobody knew about zero trust. There's this mystification, and no offense to any vendors, but there's so many different definitions now,
Mm.
and it's just been overused term where people kind of cringe when they hear it. But in the true essence of zero trust, if you learned it from Forrester or listened to John Kindervad, who's the father of zero trust
Yep.
and everything, go back to those 5 principles and understand those 5 principles. So I came. I noticed some ways cybersecurity was being done and everything, and I introduced it, and I actually educated my staff. So brought in some vendors and the art of the possible, and it was like leading a horse to water, and
Mm.
they just drank. Hey, this solves some of our problems if we did
Mm-hmm.
something like this, or this. Oh man, this is going to uncover some things. Um, we'll have much more visibility,
Mm-hmm.
and then what we also did is I have this chart and kind of stolen from the DoD, and it's in the DoD zero trust strategy that they
Mm-hmm.
released publicly a few weeks
Yep.
ago.
Yep.
There's a whole bunch of functional capabilities
Mm-hmm.
under the
Yep.
pillars. There's the five
Yep.
pillars of network, data, user,
Yep.
but they also have orchestration and
Yep.
analytics, which I
Yep.
also been using for over a year. And I said, if I did not spend another penny, how am I doing it? How are we doing at these things? And they kind of self-rated. I also gave it to each of the vendors we have already
Mm-hmm.
invested in.
Mm-hmm.
Said, if I did not spend another penny on your technology, what do you have covered?
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether I'm doing it or not, what can I cover?
Yep.
So then I knew, all right, we're doing these things well. We got something for this. We could use a little help over on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man, we have some gaps.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, created 5 foundational projects. We looked at, more efficient. We do this what I hate. VPNs has been described to me as a
Mm-hmm.
malicious, secure way to deliver a malicious payload. So I'd like to go VPNless in a way where I don't want to rely on my on-premises network.
Yeah.
How inefficient is it for you to connect to one of my data centers just to go back out to where are we putting everything? The
Yeah.
cloud and the internet.
Yeah.
That's where all of our resources are going. That's so inefficient to do this
Mm.
boomerang. So why can't I send you more direct? So we have TIC 3.0, the trusted internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
It has
Yeah.
more flexibility. There's solutions out there that give you that telemetry, security-wise, that you need, but I'm sending my people more direct. Um, Also, data mapping. Data mapping. What am I trying to protect at the end of the day with
Yeah.
zero trust?
Yeah.
I'm trying to protect data. That's the goal. A lot of people will say, talk about identity.
Mm.
And you know what? Identity is utterly important because
Yeah.
why? When we talk about zero trust, it's the right data, the right people at the right time.
Mm.
But the data has to have its integrity. And if you were a cybersecurity analyst and I got compromised, I'm going to guess your first 2 questions to me are going to be, what did I have access to?
Yeah.
And is there exfil?
Yeah.
That's not about me. You're
Yeah.
asking about the data at
Yeah.
that, really.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, but who has access to that data is very important. But the data is what. So we're going to do data mapping,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not network mapping. This is data mapping.
Yeah.
Taking an application. What is it connected to? Where is it sharing the data? What's sharing data with it? And then you're learning where data resides, lives, and where it's flowing. Because at the end of the day, I got to be able to baseline that so I know what normal looks like.
Mm.
And then when abnormal happens, I got to take an action.
Yeah.
So we're going to do data mapping. We're also doing integration of those
Mm-hmm.
tools, like
Mm-hmm.
I already talked about that, so we can get an operational risk profile of the entire environment, and mature identity management
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we have a true authoritative identity,
Mm-hmm.
even because what happens over we get new clouds, um, solutions, we have applications, we
Mm-hmm.
have active directories. What happens is how many digital IDs do you have?
Yeah.
Even in this small agency, there's so many digital IDs
Hmm.
because each one of those does have a digital identity. So we got to pull those together to look like an authoritative identity source and then put some
Hmm.
automation and governance over that. So we're looking to mature that as well. Those are our 5 foundational projects, which I believe what for our needs are great stepping stones to
Yeah.
those next maturity areas.
I mean that Jerry, that was such a like incredible description of how you have built that plan, right? And just sort of the real sort of the detail that goes into it, the overarching strategy, the tactical sort of steps that you are using to execute against that strategy. And I guess the only question that I have around that is that how are you measuring progress, right? How do you know that you are on the right path, sort of, or that you need to course correct? How are you sort of incorporating that feedback loop into your into the execution?
So we have set milestones
Hmm.
that we're going to be tracking against with success criteria at certain stages. And one of the things I'd like to do also is I'm not going for, and this is kind of why I say, use the peanut butter spread approach before, and this is goes into Jerry's opinion. I think, we abide by FISMA and we have the NIST 853, the
Yeah.
security controls and things like that. And they're very much compliance focused,
Yeah.
or that's how they're interpreted.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily meant to be that way, but that's how they're interpreted. So
Hmm.
I like to use the example, and it's oversimplified, and but it's the example I use is okay. The control may say you must provide authentication.
Hmm.
I can say, all right, username and password. I have provided authentication. I am compliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But am I effective?
Yes.
I No, I'm not. Don't say
Well,
yes.
no. I'm saying yes because
Yeah, I
the
know.
question you're asking is right.
Yeah. No. So yeah. No. No. Effectiveness and compliance are two different things. That's been my thing that I've always said is.
I concur.
So how do you measure effectiveness? So I'd like to be able to come in and do like some kind of pen testing or blue
Mm.
team type or purple team type testing incrementally.
Hmm.
Is what I put in place effective? Is it
Mm.
accomplishing? Is it meeting those principles, kind of thing? So I want to build that in. That's kind of got to figure out how to do that resource wise. But I'm hoping the SOC as a service aspects might be able to help us with that. But I want to be able to measure that effectiveness periodically. So we have those milestones built in for certain incremental milestones on our journey, and then I want to build in that effectiveness check to make sure that we do that active testing. All right,
Hmm.
did this meet that principle? Is it right
Hmm.
data to the right user at the right time? Are you able to move laterally, kind of
Hmm.
thing? So we're hoping to build those things into that incrementally as
Yeah.
well. Not wait for the end and say, all right,
Yeah.
let's go back to the beginning, and because I don't want to re-engineer. So that was very important in our pillars as well,
Hmm.
because this is an architecture. So some people will talk about, all right, we're going to concentrate solely on the identity pillar and
Hmm.
get that done. All
Yeah.
right, now we're going to move to the next pillar. Me, I get kind of concerned when I hear that
Yeah.
because this is an architecture, and I always explain enterprise architecture. I'm a big fan of enterprise
Hmm.
architecture. Some people kind of scoff at it sometimes, but there's four main areas, right? There's the business, which
Yeah.
is the financials and the mission
Yeah.
drivers, things like that. Then there's the technical, which is
Hmm.
the implementation. How do you go about doing it? But there's the security.
Yeah.
How are you securing it? And the data.
Yeah.
Um, so I focus on those four things. And so in doing that, I want to make sure that yes, we may be doing more work on one pillar than the other,
Hmm.
but we know what those relationships between the
Yeah.
pillars
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're not going back and re-engineering because something didn't work because I got so far on that other pillar, kind of thing. So knowing those relationships up front, how those have to interact, what the capabilities need to be between them, is
Hmm.
something that I'm very cautious about as well.
Yeah, that I think is such an important point, right? Because we see so much sort of across like the security media, right? Vendor posts, vendor marketing about how, right, doing focusing on one particular control, right, is the most important thing to do when you're adopting zero trust, right? But you rightly said, right, is that you need to really look holistically across your control set and have those things moving together lockstep in parallel, right?
Right.
Because the power is the almost the combination of those controls as opposed to one particular thing, because otherwise you're just over rotating.
Yeah. And when I talk about my approach towards zero trust is to oversimplify it again is first of all I'm trying to protect is data. All right,
Yeah.
so what do I do around data? Well, first I need to know, like I said, data map, but then I want to build, the micro segmentation, right? I want to micro segment that even within its own database. All data is not created equal just because it's in its own database. So what can I do around data? And then a lot of people will say, all right, devices, we got to do devices. Well, no. In reality, what facilitates access to data? Applications.
Yeah.
So what do we do around applications? Now, applications need what to live on? They need a device to live on.
Yeah.
They have to live somewhere. All right, then what do we do around the device? And I'm not going to manage every device, right? I have public websites that may need authentication. I'm not going to start managing every device, so there's different risk levels to different things within these categories. And then devices need what to talk? They need networks. What do I do around networks? Am I managing it or am I not? What can I do that's within my control? And then, of course, the users, all right? What do I do around identity management to make sure the right users get the access to the right data at the right time? So I kind of work inside out in that fashion. When I talk about this. So I kind of start with the data. That's what I'm trying to do at the end of the day, and then work my way back through all those.
Yeah, and I think that's I mean that really is sort of the right way, and the way whether it's sort of John expressing how you kind of drive zero trust maturity, right? That's very much how he sort of envisioned like a zero trust strategy being executed, right? As very much a holistic view. Because otherwise, what we see is, I think, just going back, right, is that it's tainted by sort of vendor marketing saying, this is where you have to do, right? You must start with this pillar and get that perfect.
Because I want you to buy my thing.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So I want to go back. You were talking about sort of enterprise architecture, right? And you talked
But I will say something before you go into that. I will say this. We cannot do it without the vendors, though.
Yeah, that's true.
They have the technologies. They're building the technologies. But what we're trying to do through the working group through ATARC is we're kind of going into phase 2. We gave everybody their platform for their specific thing. But phase 2, we're saying we want team up and we want to see it end to end through all the pillars. You team up with whomever you need to if you're missing that pillar or those functionality, we need to see it. We need to see it work all the way through. Don't show us slides. Don't send us sales pitches. We want now. Here's your use cases. Show us. So that's kind of what we're trying to drive for now. So.
But I think that just talking about that sort of what is that complete solution, right? I think there's Carnegie Mellon had that Zero Trust Industry Day back in early September, where again, right, very much sort of academia with sort of like sort of integrated with government, really pushing that integrated approach to zero trust, and that was really refreshing to see, and I'm kind of excited about sort of the outcomes of that. So I want to go back to something you said about sort of enterprise architecture, right? And one of the key facets of that being aligning with the mission, aligning with the business objectives. So how in your role, right, how have you aligned zero trust, the zero trust program, zero trust strategy, right, with the sort of overarching raison d'etre of the OIG?
I'm glad you asked this question because I talk about this as well. So I don't look at zero trust as solely a cybersecurity effort or an IT effort. There is the business of the IG, and sometimes I'll even remind my engineers is the OIG was not put on this earth to do IT. That is not the main mission. IT is the enabler. So saying that, we actually did a presentation on zero trust to all the user community. Now, kind of letting them know things are going to change. Here's some benefits we're going to bring you. We're going to send you more direct, so better performance, better interoperability, single sign-on. Some of those things that we're going to introduce, which make the users so much more happier,
Mm.
right? So, but also what the objective is the question that we're going to be asking even more is, how do you want to work?
Mm.
Do you need to be more mobile? Are you
Mm-hmm.
missing things? What works well? What doesn't? Why? Because we can build those requirements in because we're modernizing.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, we're bringing new technologies, we're bringing new capabilities, we're modernizing. So by including their requirements, a lot less friction when we implement because we listened and we're gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what am I getting out of it? What do you need access to? When do you need access to it? So now I'm getting validation on my
Mm-hmm.
inventory of data sources. I'm building personas because I know how people want to work or how they work, what devices they use most. Are they coming from home and networks I manage? Or are they coming in the
Mm-hmm.
office? I'm learning about a bunch of stuff. Now we're starting to understand things that we can feed into our zero trust as well
Mm-hmm.
because this is how they want to work. This is the mission that they have to do. This is the data sources that they rely on. What are those data sources? They have PII? Do they not have PII? Are they available to the public? Are they not available to the
Mm-hmm.
public? And really understanding that. People in the different offices, they mention it sometimes or ask about it. What's that going to look like in a zero trust environment kind of thing. And it's good because now we got them thinking,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, things are gonna change, but I'm gonna get access to my stuff. I'll have integrity in what I'm accessing. These things like I'm working from home. Oh man, I don't have to get that VPN hooked up. I'm going straight to my things. I'm me as a CIO. I'm getting my security telemetry
Mm.
still. So we're telling them what the benefits are. And then, that communication of what they need, when they need it, how they want to work, and build that in and make it more of a modernization effort rather than this bolt-on security
Yep.
IT effort.
Yep. 100%. And but the kind of the question that I have, I think that sort of that proactive sort of, here is how it's going to benefit you, right? And how would you like to work, right? Or what would you like to be able to do? Those are sort of really great questions, and enabling that is amazing. But it's also like ROI on security investments is one of the great intangibles, right?
Yes.
So it's sort of like, and like going back to saying, yeah, we could do let's say a penetration test before and after, or we could do a threat model before and after, and we can say that, okay, now we have remediated this threat and so on, right? But like when they say, okay, right, I get that, but what am I getting back? How do you demonstrate ROI?
We just had that question the other day from my boss. As a matter of fact, it's like, all right, you're asking for this money, you get this money. Are we making any savings or anything? I
Yeah.
hate saying savings. It's always cost avoidance because I'm never going to ask for a reduced budget as a result of something. I'm going to spend it someplace else, but I say cost avoidance. So that got me thinking, and it was funny because the week or the 2 weeks before, I asked somebody in our security team, hey, what is the cost of an incident?
Yeah.
How much does an incident cost? So yeah, I'm investing in security, and it's an investment, and I might be shutting down a few things, but I'm still gonna spend it on the new things that I'm implementing. But what we have right now, and I got to put some dollar figures against it, is all right. There's small, medium, and critical events.
Mm-hmm.
Here's typically what it takes in man hours from the operations team, from the security team, to remediate those things, the impact and loss of stop work and things for the mission and things like that. So we're putting together that graphic
Mm-hmm.
to kind of show it's like if something does happen, and something will, you can
Yeah.
never say never.
Yeah.
Something will happen at some level, whether it be a non-malicious user making a
Mm-hmm.
mistake, which could be a small incident, or you claiming to call me in the help desk, and I give you access to my PC, and you start doing whatever, or ransomware or anything. Here's the cost of an incident.
Yeah.
Now, I'm asking to invest this much compared to that, where you're not getting anything done, we're not supporting the mission just because we're cleaning up whatever mess
Yeah.
came about. So we're actually putting that graphic together right now to kind of tell that story, because I've been through some incidents, and the person I'm working with that's in our CISO shop now comes from state as well. So we kind of have a good idea, you know, the resources it takes, the after effects, the
Yeah.
the interruption to work, the days, the nights, the people, bringing in third parties, specialties,
Mm.
um, depending on what the technology that's compromised is, expertise from that, and then there's the residual, um, kind of that's the event, but what are you doing to prevent it after? So
Yeah.
there's always
Yeah.
some long-term strategy, to kind of, hopefully you don't just band-aid it. Hopefully you
Yeah.
put together a
Yeah.
strategy. Now there's a cost to doing that. Um, let's get ahead of that.
Mm.
Invest in
Exactly.
this now because it's probably going to cost you more
Exactly.
if this event happens. And here's the dollar figure against that. And let's
Exactly.
say that's just one. You know, if we don't do this, you might have multiples of these. So,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So that's what we're putting together actually right now. It's funny you asked that.
Yeah, I mean, if only it didn't take an incident to act as a forcing function, right?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately that's what I've seen in some places. It's like you can warn. It's like the little boy that cried wolf,
Mm.
kind of thing. But the wolf actually shows up, and
Yeah.
guess what? Oh, yeah, we should we should do
Yeah.
something about that.
So true. I want to ask you about sort of just outside like the OIG, right? And we see that, let's say, the healthcare sector is particularly targeted these days, right? And too often those, like, a healthcare provider is forced to essentially stop serving patients and sometimes stop delivering emergency care, critical care, because they have the attack has essentially taken out access to their critical IT systems, right? What is going to force? I mean, just asking you about healthcare because of who you work for, right? What is going to force kind of a increased focus on resilience for healthcare providers so that they're not? This is not a rinse and repeat.
Yeah. And this is just an opinion. I think there's still some legacy systems that support some of these entities that you're talking about. Um, and I think what it is it's got to be embraced by the organization. It
Mm.
can't just be the IT people. It's got to be something that is understood, and whether it's got to be the IT people that raised this. I've read a lot of articles where, in private businesses, such as some that you're referring to, that there's recommendations the CIO should be sitting on the board, um, you know, or the CISO,
Yeah.
either or, so that because when you're managing risk, it's not just an IT thing; it's
Mm.
also a mission thing as well. What is the political aspects of the risk and the decisions that you're making, along with and then that informs the IT risk as well, as part of that. But I think it has to be well understood that this is going back to the ROI. This is why this is a good investment.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to help mitigate this risk. So telling that story and making it an organizational priority. And that's the thing about the executive order that came out last year. Making strengthen the nation's
Mm-hmm.
IT,
Yeah.
cybersecurity, and zero trust was a big aspect of that, which then resulted in OMB Memo
Yeah.
2209. It was embraced at the highest levels.
Yeah.
Now they're not just making it an IT thing; they're making it the agency's responsibility. You
Mm.
must do these things. Um, so everybody gets on board. Now it's prioritized at the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a little different in the private sector, how it goes about doing that. But, the federal government, in this sense, being transparent in that way and showing that this is a priority for the federal government, some are seeing that as well, I think, and saying, the federal government's a little ahead of us on that. But I mean, there's some in the financial that are ahead of us in technology wise and things like that. But I think it's really needs to be understood, embraced as not an IT thing. This is a
Hmm.
cultural thing
Yeah.
for an organization, and it needs to be communicated.
And as you say, right, you kind of re-emphasize what is now just a common theme, that security needs to be a board level priority, right? It can't just be the purview of the security organization or the IT organization. And you spoke about sort of the executive order, the OMB memo, and those zero trust initiatives that you're very close to, right? How confident are you that they're going to deliver the culture change, the posture change, and the overall improvement of sort of cyber resilience that at least they hope to?
Yeah, I think I'm the type of person. It's like one step forward is better than not taking a step at
Mm,
all. So I think in different agencies, offices, and things like that, we're all at different things. We all have made different investments of things. We're all at different maturity levels. But I think everybody's grasped onto this. I think people are starting to get an understanding. I think there's still some education, but everybody's, I think, from what I see, is moving in the right direction.
mm-hmm.
Based on where they are. Now, are we all going to get to the same place at the same time, or are we all going to look the same at the end of the day? No. But to me, it comes down going back to those five principles. Am
Yeah,
I addressing those five principles at the end of the day? Doesn't matter how I did it. Can I address those five principles? And am I being effective at my cybersecurity? Can I prove that? Yes. Yes or no? Now, like I said, we're all going to be look different at the end of the day. But as long as we're meeting those five principles, I think is very important. Everybody's moving in the right direction.
awesome.
I just think there's some struggles in some areas, and there's always going to be, but I think there's good forward motion. And like I said, if you're taking a baby step forward,
Yeah,
that's better than just standing there not doing anything. So,
awesome. And so, just talking about like baby steps or even giant steps, what excites you most about the future of zero trust and zero trust adoption, whether it's in the Fed or just generally in sort of globally?
what excites me, well, what scares me is we had a discussion with an
We could do what
analyst the other
scares you.
day
We could
on
do what
quantum
scares you.
computing, and that's coming sooner than we think.
Mm,
And it's not going to be implementation of for solutions that can quantum computing can help enable, but it's also malicious actors leveraging quantum computing.
mm-hmm,
And looking at security in this different way than being compliant, doing the check boxes, not looking at it holistically, not being siloed anymore, looking across, understanding what I actually own, what is most important to me, and how I'm protecting that. I think is very important. That's what I'm excited about. That
mm-hmm,
it's breaking down those barriers. It's a holistic approach. It's an approach towards effectiveness, like I
mm-hmm.
said, and being more effective. Because things like quantum computing scare the heck out of me. I think we were talking. He was telling us, in 10 years, it's going to be pretty much mainstream in
Mm,
some fashion, and that's scary as heck. Now, there has been, I think, an executive order that came out on that as well, where I think, we got to we got to get moving. So, to protect ourselves against that.